Well, hello there, and welcome to the Special Ed Strategist Podcast. I am your host, Wendy Taylor. I wear many hats in the world of special education, from being an educational therapist to an IEP coach and even the director of Learning Essentials. And over 25 plus years and many, many IEPs later, I have sat on both sides of that table as a parent and a professional. And if you're new here, I am the driving force behind Learning Essentials. We are a team of specialized educators with advanced degrees in special education, and our mission is simple yet profound: empowering families, bridging learning gaps, and accessing special education services. It's about bringing you along on this journey to educational excellence, unlocking your child's full potential. So thanks for joining me today on this solo episode. We are going to have a casual conversation about something that might sound a bit complicated, but it is crucial in the world of special education. Today, we're talking about prior written notice, or PWN, and I'm here to break it down for you and make it easy to understand. You may be wondering, what exactly is a PWN and why is it important to you, your child, and special education? So the word prior in prior written notice is a bit confusing. It specifically relates to any proposed changes that may be intended to be implemented after the IEP meeting. Here's the key. The law requires parents to receive notice prior to these changes going into effect, not before your IEP meeting, but prior to the changes going into effect. So technically, you'll receive this document after your IEP meeting, letting you know any kind of proposed changes or refusals that are going to take place before this new IEP comes to light and gets kicked into gear. So let's dive right in. Prior written notice, it's a notification you get from your school every time they propose to take certain actions with respect to your kiddo, or even when they refuse to take these actions. So let me give you an example. These actions include things like initiating or changing the identification, evaluation, educational placement of your kiddo, and providing a free and appropriate education. I want you to think about a PWN as your heads up about any changes that might impact your kiddo's education. It's like receiving a notice before a big event. But why is this so important? Well, it serves as a vehicle for the local education agency, or the LEA, that is part of your IEP team, to ensure that parents actively participate in the special education process. So let's break this down a little bit further with some examples. Imagine you're planning a road trip. You want to make sure everyone's on the same page about the route and stops along the way. PWN is like the itinerary for your kiddo's educational journey, summarizing the school's recommendations and outlining different options. Your PWN is your roadmap to understanding what the school is proposing, why, which is essential for making informed decisions. So how really important is our PWN? It is incredibly important. It is your guaranteed legal rights as a caregiver of a student with an IEP. Under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, parents have procedural safeguards, which include a full explanation of your rights in a clear, easy to understand manner. One of these safeguards is called prior written notice. So let me give you an example. It's like having a legal guidebook that ensures you know your rights and can challenge decisions if needed. The PWN is your tool for staying informed and empowered in the special education process. Now, you may be wondering where you can find laws related to PWN. It's under Section 303-421, Prior Written Notice and Procedural Safeguard Notice. Go ahead. I want you to Google it. You'll find the law, understand the language. Plus, the notice must be written in a language that's easy for the general public to understand, and it needs to be provided to a parent in the native language. So I want you to empower yourselves, look up the law, understand your rights, and this can be the first step to being an informed advocate for your kiddo. So when should you expect to receive that prior written notice? Here's the important part. There are 8 instances when a prior written notice should be provided, including when the school proposes to initiate or change the identification of your student. Remember, IDEA has 13 identification codes for IEPs, and that, for example, if they're changing that identification, say from a specific learning disability to OHI, which is other health impairment, That would be an example. Change of placement or the provision of free and appropriate education for your child. Let's break down with examples. So if the school plans to change your child's educational placement, they should provide a prior written notice so you can understand the reasons behind the change. I want you to stay proactive and ask for that prior written notice whenever there's a proposed change or refusal. It's your right to receive one. I also, if you're at a table and again, if there's a proposed change or refusal, I want you to ask, just say specifically, how are you wording that in the prior written notice? Or I want to make sure I expect that when I receive my prior written notice, that this is going to be outlined in there. It's a great way to have that communication tool of everything outlined that took place during that meeting. So it must contain a comprehensive description of actions proposed or refused by the school district. So according to IDA, it should include 7 items. So first, it needs to have a description of the action. For instance, if there's a reevaluation, the PWN should describe why it's happening and what changes are expected. An explanation of why. So let's say the school is refusing a change. The PWN should clarify the reasons behind the refusal. It should have a description of the evaluation procedures. This could include details about the assessments used to make the decisions. Remember, we need data to drive our next steps in our decision. It should have a statement about your rights. It should mention your rights and how to access them, your rights as a parent. Sources for assistance. So the PWN should provide information on who you can contact if you need help understanding the provisions. Other options considered. So for example, if the school proposed a change, the PWN should outline what other options were considered and why they were rejected so that you can really track, and anybody that picks up that IEP with the prior written notice attached can track the conversations, suggestions, why they were rejected. So you can really see what was outlined, why you made the choices that were made. And finally, other relevant factors. So it should cover any additional information that's important for understanding the proposal or refusal of an action by the school. When you receive your PWN, I want you to go through each of these points to get a clear picture of the school's decision and your rights. Let's talk about when changes are typically made. So most often they're discussed and implemented during your kiddo's IEP meeting or shortly thereafter. Sometimes a change can occur as a result of an amendment to an IEP without a meeting. So even in these situations, a prior written notice is still required. You should be notified before the change, especially when both of you and the school agree to it. So after receiving your prior written notice, if you don't understand the proposed changes or don't agree, request an IEP meeting for further discussion before any changes are implemented. So sometimes I get the question about, what if my kiddo doesn't have an IEP? There are instances where you as a parent are still going to be issued a prior written notice, even if your child does not actively have an IEP. The same legal requirements would apply, such as when a school refuses to conduct an initial evaluation to determine eligibility for special education services. If you reached out to the school, you'd like to have a meeting to discuss your kiddo's gaps and gains, and you have concerns and you think there could potentially be a learning disability or something else that may qualify that student for special education services. If you go to the meeting and the school just decides that they're not going to move forward with that initial evaluation, they're still going to need to provide you with a prior written notice explaining why they decided not to move forward. Along that same lines, if you have a child and you are concerned and you go to the school, they do the evaluations, you go back to the meeting, they review all the evaluations, and at that point they say, you know what, we don't see enough of an impact here to move forward with special education services. There's an example of when you would have a prior written notice. So you're not in special education, your child does not have an IEP, but you have started that process. Even if your child doesn't have an IEP, I want you still to stay informed and proactive in the special education process. Your rights are still protected. Now, what does the law not require when it comes to prior written notice? So it's important to know what the law requires and what it does not specifically require. So there's no set date for the prior written notice. There's no requirement to confirm the receipt of prior written notice or need for you to acknowledge that you received it. So I would always ask, make sure you know how the school is going to communicate with you, if they're mailing something home, if it's electronic, so that you know when to look out for any type of paperwork from the school, especially if it's regarding special education support. So understanding what the law doesn't require can also help you focus on what matters most in that process. Additionally, you don't have the right to request information to be included in the prior written notice. It's not mandated by law. I know that contradicts what I just said about asking for certain information to be included. And I think there's a line of communication there of ensuring that things are placed in there so that you have the information documented. And so, but it's not mandated by law, but it's good information to know and to be able to ask and communicate with your team. When it comes to when you should expect that prior written notice, the federal law doesn't provide a specific timeline. However, states generally require a reasonable time before the district implements the action, meaning if it's a change of placement, if it's an adjustment to an IEP. It's essential for schools to use common sense when timing the provision of written notice. So giving you enough time to assess the changes, make an informed decision while avoiding any type of predetermination. So my suggestion, typically you should, when you receive a copy of an IEP, that prior written notice should be part of that package. Before we wrap up, here's quick tips. I want you to be proactive before your child's IEP meeting concludes. Ask when you'll receive the prior written notice. Who do you expect to receive it from? Is the case manager? Is it a special education teacher? Is it the LEA, which is typically like your principal? How are you going to receive it again? Is that digital? Is it somebody's going to mail it home? Are they going to stick it in your kiddo's backpack? Just so you kind of know. So if the school typically sends documents via email, make sure they have your correct email address. If you prefer a hard copy, have that conversation, make sure they have the right mailing address or in the right person to send it home with. Sometimes sending it home in a backpack is not the best option for some of our students. So just making sure that you communicate the best way to get those important documents. Before ending the IEP meeting, I want you to ask the school to review with the team all the proposed changes that are going to be written in that prior written notice. So you could just say, hey, let's recap here. This is what I understand is happening. If there are errors or misrepresentations, it's best to collaboratively discuss and correct them before you even leave or before that prior written notice has even been issued. So it's critical to ensure everyone's on the same page about those proposed changes, and any discrepancies, we want to resolve them before that official notice has been sent out. This way you can avoid any surprises. You can make sure the prior written notices accurately reflect the decisions that made during your IEP team. Lastly, if you don't receive a prior written notice, remember that it's a federal requirement. It should be part of your child's records. You can make a formal request for it in writing. And if the school refuses to provide it or attempts to implement the proposed changes without your notice, especially if you don't agree with the proposed changes, you do have that right to file a state complaint with the State Department of Education, which oversees your compliance. This is just my giving you information. Remember, I am not a lawyer. So if you have questions, you may want to seek legal advice, but this is just coming from my special education experience at that table. So your child's educational records, including the prior written notice, those are a vital part of the process. So if you don't receive it, always request it. Even if everyone agrees on the proposed changes, that prior written notice is still required. So regardless of whether everyone's in agreement, a prior written notice serves as a crucial documentation of the changes and decisions made during an IEP meeting. Always ensure you receive it. So thank you for joining me on this episode of the Special Ed Strategist podcast. That was a lot of information about a PWN, but I hope this conversation made it more understandable and relatable with the examples. So remember, your participation in the special education process is crucial, and understanding that PWN is a valuable tool in advocating for your kiddo. As we wrap up today's episode, I encourage you to like, share, and rate our podcast to help us reach even more families and individuals who can benefit from this knowledge. Before we say goodbye, keep in mind that while PWN may seem like a legal intricacy, it's a fundamental right for caregivers of students with IEPs. It offers you advance notice of the opportunity to review and challenge decisions that could impact your child's education. When a school proposes changes related to that identification, evaluation, placement, or provision of FAPE for your kiddo, you should expect that prior written notice. This includes instances where the school proposes to initiate change or refuse these actions. Always remember, communication is key. Don't hesitate to request an IEP meeting if you have questions or concerns about proposed changes, and strive to maintain that collaborative dialogue with your kiddo's school to ensure that all their educational needs are met And if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're not receiving that PWN, make a formal request for it. It's your right as a caregiver and essential for a transparent and informed special education process. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, bye from now. Wendy Taylor, your special education strategist.